Welcome back, my beautiful friends. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York. I'm your host, Zen Sams. Coming up, we have my friend Rich Valdes, host of This is America with Rich Valdes, the voice of Hispanic conservatives. And he also is the director of operation at Project Veritas in his former life, and currently a producer and regular guest host of the nationally syndicated Mark Levine Show. Very impressive stuff. Today, he's here to chat with me about Brittney Griner and the total lopsidedness of prisoner swaps with Russia. Now, the United States is negotiating with Russia to exchange two Americans being held in Russian prisons for a notorious arms dealer serving time in America. Now, the deal is totally lopsided. The two Americans, we have the basketball star Brittney Griner and Paul Whelan, who's a security company executive, not criminals, not threatening individuals here, certainly not remotely comparable to Victor Bout, who is a notorious purveyor of arms to terrorists, once known as the Merchant of Death. All right. Now, they're not going to include, as of now, but they are in conversations, Mark Fogel, who's an American teacher sentenced to an absurd 14 years in prison for taking marijuana into Russia. Now, those infractions are very similar to the ones Brittney is charged with, and it's kind of hypocritical, right, if they don't add him in the mix. But for reasons the State Department hasn't clarified, the U.S. government has just designated Miss Griner and Mr. Whelan as wrongfully detained, but not this poor guy, Mr. Fogel. So Mr. Fogel was a popular teacher and the Anglo-American star, so to speak, at the Anglo-American school in Moscow, not a U.S. embassy employee, according to the Washington Post, as some reports have described him. And he had surgeries on his back and his shoulders and a knee replacement, and he was taking miracle marijuana for this. Now, Ms. Griner, she was a WNBA star. She still is, as she testified that she used marijuana on the advice of a doctor. Now, this is hitting very close to home, as you know that I am a big proponent of medicinal marijuana. Now, both of these individuals were arrested on charges related to possessions of the marijuana leaf and found in the luggage on arrival at the Moscow airport. Both have pleaded guilty. Mr. Whelan, though, is a former Marine who worked as director of global security and investigations for Borg Warner, and he had visited Russia several times. He's being held on espionage. He denies the charges. Now, he's in for 16 years. And here to chat some more and give us very, very insightful perspective is Rich Valdes. Welcome to the show, superstar.
Hey, Zen, welcome. Thank you for having me.
Okay, tell me what is going on here. I broke it down as best I could, but this is clearly, the issue. First of all, the issue is not whether the three American prisoners are guilty, nor should efforts for to free Americans held in repressive countries be based on their celebrity or the public generated by their arrests. But talk to me about, what do you say that the purpose of these hostages to exchange for imprisoned Russians? What's the overall picture here? What message are we sending to America and to the world?
I'm going to back up a little bit to give you a big picture perspective here. So I was buying a cup of coffee the other day, and I go to a Cuban spot that I go to every day. And the guy escaped Cuba from Havana to Key West on a jet ski in the middle of the night. Now, and I find it interesting because he tells me, way before even the Brittney Griner thing, he brings up a different case where the Cuban government did something similar. And so many of these communist regimes or dictatorial regimes, this is a tactic that they employ pretty regularly, which is, we're going to imprison someone that is relatively innocent to get the other country to act. And they do this with the express purpose of knowing what favor they have in their back pocket. So they'll go ahead and get Ms. Griner or anybody else who, by most people's standards, what did they do? They're an innocent person. They don't really care about that. What they really care about is being able to say, oh, by the way, you're holding on to so-and-so. You're holding on to the Merchant of Death. You're holding on to somebody that we really, really want. So this is exactly how they go about getting their result. And then they hype it up in the media. They start pushing it. A big part of these regimes is to have partnerships with the media. This is why I think you see so much of a cooperation between the Biden administration and the media here, because they try to sway public opinion to get people to almost beg for the result that they're looking for. So I think that's exactly what's happened here. They claim the guy that's a teacher, that he's a spy, that he works for the embassy. They're claiming that these other two people, it is illegal in their country. And whether you or I think it's heavy-handed or not, that's their rule. Now, whether the enforcement is selective or not, I couldn't tell you. I make it my business to not go to places like Moscow, so they won't take a guy like me and throw me in some gulag somewhere, because I realize there's only a certain amount of places where you're safe. There's only a certain amount of places where your speech is protected. So having that, in the back of my head, I tend to be guided accordingly. Now, so fast forward to this Brittney Griner thing. I think that she was probably targeted by the Russian government because of her celebrity status, because of the fact that she was a woman, because of the fact that she was a minority, ethnic minority, and probably because of the fact of her outspokenness on gender issues. And you put all of that together, and this is something that Russia fights against all the time. And they figure this is perfect. The United States falls into this all the time. We'll use this as the perfect leverage piece to get exactly what we want.
And they did. And, like you mentioned, very interesting, the Russian justice system, totally corrupt. But like those in China and Iran, other countries with which the United States has organized prisoner swaps, is notoriously political, like you said. And any American imprisoned in those countries, guilty or not, to your point, is likely being held either for propaganda purposes or as hostages to exchange for imprisoned Russians, like you said. And we see this over and over again. But Rich, is the United States really ready to let the merchant of death out of prison? I mean, Victor Bout is one of the world's most notorious arms dealers. And right now, he's going to be the key to a possible deal with Moscow for the freedom of these two or maybe potentially three prisoners. But, they had made an offer, I know, back in June, and a substantial offer made by the Biden administration. And the Kremlin had yet to respond. But if the swap goes ahead, and it feels like it will, it really could transform perceptions of how the U.S. deals with governments who detain its citizens overseas, making American travelers much more tempting targets. What do you say to this?
Well, I think that this is a legitimate concern. And like I just said, if I were to travel internationally, I would do it at a time where I believe that the folks in Washington have my back. I don't think that's the case right now. And I think most Americans, or at least the polls that came out, about a month ago, say that most Americans don't feel that America's on the right track. I don't think they feel that the Biden administration, or even the majority party, the Democrat Party, has their best interest in mind. When you look at all sorts of issues, and not to get too off the beaten path, but whether it's our economy, the inflation numbers that are going up, the producer price index that's going up, I mean, you name it, we're not performing well on a number of different levels. So I would not trust our government to watch my back if I were going somewhere internationally. I would expect that I'm going to be on my own. So is the United States prepared to make this deal? You bet. What deal isn't Joe Biden ready to make? He left behind all this military equipment, I think $82 billion worth of military equipment in Afghanistan, which, and again, I wasn't born last night, right? Like the old saying, I was born at night, but not last night. You don't just leave stuff behind. These are negotiated deals where we say, oh, we're going to make a deal and we're going to throw in this. So he did that. So if Biden's willing to make deals like that, he's willing to give seemingly an unending amount of money to Ukraine, I think he's going to be very amenable to giving away whatever prisoners Putin wants.
Yeah, it's true. And, at the foot of the midterms, when the Democrats so desperately need a push, and now we know that the LGBTQ community, they're going to be, very, very excited about this prisoner swap. But at the end of the day, the swaps are rarely even. We know that this Russian, Mr. Bout, the Russian guy, is mooted as the price for freeing the Americans. And he has such a notorious history. But to your point, it's money talks and BS walks for the Biden administration. It doesn't make me feel comfortable as an American knowing that this person is being let back out onto the streets, and he could wreak havoc not just to our security but to global terrorism. But it's really hard not to see this as a potential huge victory for Russia and Vladimir Putin, right? An exchange could provide days of propaganda fuel for the Kremlin. Like you said, they're going to really jump on this one. And it could also this is going to be useful in procuring weapons for Russia to use in Ukraine with this guy back out on the streets. I mean, but whatever the outcome, it's clear that Moscow already saw both Griner and Whelan as bargaining chips, like you said, even way before any U.S. swap proposal. So this is clearly, they're very, very smart about the way they're doing this.
Yeah, well, I think they also have an expectation that they've seen the weakness that Biden has shown, and he's shown that he's a hardcore pacifist. I mean, to the point where the earlier in August, there was the controversy over Pelosi going to Taiwan. You look at something like that where the Chinese were really taking a strong position saying, you better not come because we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And the American president sat there and just said, well, she's free to do what she wants to do. But, our military says it's probably not a good idea. This type of pacifistic approach does a real disservice to America. America needs to stay strong, especially in the face of dictators like Putin and Xi and others.
Without a doubt. And at this point right now, symbolism matters. Symbolism matters a great deal. You have Biden fist bumping last 2 weeks ago with Mohammed bin Salman, and that really had a poorly received effect with in terms of our stance with the world. I mean, they got us exactly where they wanted us, and we got no oil deal. Now you have him doing prisoner swaps, and freeing a prisoner like Bout, it is definitely a risk, right? It's not close to, he's not only close to Russian intelligence, Rich, but he is a future threat. He was convicted in 2011 of conspiracy to kill Americans, amongst a lot of other charges. And a high-profile swap like this is definitely sending a message to hostile governments around the world and bandits around the world that the U.S. is ready to cut deals to get people home, and that's just not okay.
Sadly, that's the truth, Zen. I think you hit the nail on the head, and we're going to see more of it. And it seems like Biden, I think he's just been in Washington too long to see from the outside with that freshness, that perspective, where I think Biden is very comfortable with saying, hey, look, folks, my hands are tied. These are our people. We got to get them home. And that's it. And he's just going to come out with some platitude and say, look, we got to let all the terrorists go. We've got to do the right thing. And then he's going to go for a walk with his wife on the beach and forget what he did and shake hands with the air. And America's going to be much worse because of it.
Of course. And, look, if you look at the history of prisoner swaps, right, both of Biden's immediate predecessors, right, if you look at Obama and Trump, they both did deals with U.S. enemies like the Taliban and Iran to get Americans home. But this case is especially treacherous given the high profiles of those involved. So at this point, Biden really has to weigh the human consequences against the geopolitical costs. Does it really make sense for Bout to remain in a U.S. cell if he could be used to get 2 American lives home? Of course, that's a great point. But whatever the larger consequence that this is going to entail, the families of both Brittney and Paul would take the deal in a heartbeat, obviously. And Biden has been facing this extreme domestic political pressure from families, from friends, and from colleagues of Griner, especially the LGBTQ community. So, a cynic might argue that his reeling presidency could use the kind of political win that returning Americans, home that are imprisoned overseas is going to bring. But I don't, none of this feels comfortable to me. None of it.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think they're trying to go for a win or something they perceive to be a win. But I think it's a little too late. A lot of damage has been done. I don't think there's a lot of winning that Biden can do between now and the midterms. I don't think there's much he can do between now and his reelection. But it is, that's a lot of time. So
that's a lot of time. We'll leave it at that. And we are out of time, my friend. But thank you so much for coming on and enlightening us. You are not just the voice of Hispanic conservatives, but definitely the voice of reason. Thank you for coming on, Rich.
Thanks, Zen.
Guys, you have to check him out. Rich Valdes, host of This Is America with Rich Valdes. Check him out on the gram at Rich Valdes. That's with an S, not a Z. And also head to his website, richvaldes.com. That was our PoliticGal segment. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York. We'll be right back after this.